we are on page 160.
Funnily enough, so am I. Yes.
And we finished the Hachna.
Right.
Now in Vav, he starts the Havdalah. Havdalah is quite complex here. It's not easy. In fact, it's it's a piece that would have deserved at least 5-6 pages, like what they do here in a page and a half, or 2 pages. It's a very complex topic. It's not an easy topic at all. It's not explained very well. But that's what we have. So we'll try to do the best, make the best of it.
Here is what you is.
כשנעשו הכלים למשכן והגיעה התורה של המנורה, אומרים חז"ל נתגשע במשה. When the vessels of the tabernacle were made, they were fashioned, formed. So the sages say that Moshe Rabbeinu had a problem with the menorah. Moshe Rabbeinu לא ידע איך לעשות את המנורה. He didn't know how to make it. אמר לו הקדוש ברוך הוא להשליך את הזהב לתוך האש ומזה יצא המנורה. So Hashem told him to just toss the gold out of which the menorah would be made into the furnace, and the menorah would form itself.
That was like Egel as well.
Okay.
Maybe this is comparable to that.
לכאורה בלתי מובן. It seems to be difficult to understand. במה שונה המנורה מכל הכלים? שאת כל הכלים ידע משה לעשות ורק במנורה נתקשה. How is the menorah different than all the other vessels in the tabernacle? And Moshe did know how to make them. It's just the menorah that he had a problem with. ועוד בלתי מובן. הרי משה רבנו ראה כבר את המנורה בשמיים, ככתוב כאשר הוראת בהר, ומשום מה איפה לא ידע. So Moshe Rabbeinu already saw the image of the menorah when he was on the mountain for 40 days and 40 nights. As the pasuk says, as you were shown on the mountain. So how is it that he didn't know how to make it? Meaning he didn't understand what it should look like. From the description, from the words, there's always a gap between describing something with words and showing the picture. But he saw the picture. הדבר יובן אחר הסברת עניין המשכן וכליו באופן כללי. So to understand this, we have to understand the whole purpose, let's call it, of the tabernacle and its vessels. כשהתורה מתחילה לדבר בתחילה פרשת תרומה על עשיית משכן וכלים, היא פותחת בהקדמה כללית, דבר בני ישראל ויקחו לי. So we saw that when the Torah begins to talk about making the tabernacle and its vessels, it starts with the words, speak to the children of Israel, and they should take from me a truma. They should take from me a donation. There are 2 things mentioned here. Daber el bnei Israel, speak to the children of Israel. And the second thing is, v'yikchu li, and they should take from me. לאחר שתי הקדמות אלו אפשר לגשת לעשיית המשכן. And after these 2 introductions, it's very interesting they call these introductions, but speak to the children of Israel, and they should take from me. Only then you can create a tabernacle. What are these 2 things? Speak to the children of Israel, and they should take from me. So, הסבר הדבר הוא, the explanation is, המשכן נעשה הרי מדברים גשמיים. The tabernacle was made out of physical materials. זהב וכסף ונחושך, gold, silver and copper. כלומר, מדברים גשמיים נעשה משכן ומקדש לקדוש ברוך הוא. Out of physical objects and materials, you make a dwelling place for God. ונשאלת השאלה, and there's a question, is immediately raised, איך אפשר לעשות מן הגשמיות מקדש? How can you make a dwelling place for what is beyond the material, for God who is neither material nor spiritual, who is beyond all this? How can you make him a dwelling place out of something physical? מקדש ניתן לעשות לכאורה בלימוד תורה, בתפילה וכדומה. כיצד ניתן לעשות מקדש בגשמיות? People have a problem today with the fact that there's going to be sacrifices in the temple. They don't want to hear about sacrifices. And what? A building you don't have a problem with? It's the same problem. Just because the sacrifices are less to your liking today. But the problem is, the philosophical problem is still a philosophical problem. It doesn't matter whether you have a sacrifice, don't have a sacrifice. The actual presence of a building, and you're saying this building is a dwelling place for God, that's the problem. How can something material be a dwelling place for God? You can make a dwelling place for God, as it were, at least that's what people think, spiritually, right? from learning Torah, from praying. These things, they make a dwelling place for God. Meaning God can dwell in these actions. But in something physical. יתר על כן בלתי מובן הדבר לאור הידוע שהשראת האלוקות שהייתה בבית המקדש הייתה בדרגה נעלית יותר מן האור המאיר בעולמות. What's even more difficult to understand is that the level of God's revelation, or call it the inspiration of godliness that was in the temple, that was in the tabernacle, was greater than anything in the world, anything in our physical, spiritual world. It doesn't matter. It was greater than all of that. ואפילו בעולמות העליונים ישנה הערה בלבד של אלוקות, ולבית המקדש הייתה המשכת עצמותו של הקדוש ברוך הוא בכבודו ובעצמו. Why? Because even in the spiritual worlds, all you see is a transient revelation of God. But you don't see God's essence, God's substance, as it's called. Atzmuto mauto. No good translation in English. I don't know if anybody in Hebrew knows what it means. Usually when there's not a good translation, you also don't know what it means in Hebrew. But at least in Hebrew, everybody knows how to say the words, atzmuto mauto. So mauto, we know, it's essence. Atzmuto, substance, what do you mean? Yesterday...
In the base of Mikdash, in the Mishkan.
What? No, we'll see in a moment that it was in the tabernacle the same way. Just in the tabernacle, you have this transience, which gives you a feeling that maybe it's a better vessel, it's an easier vessel for understanding how it would contain godliness. In the base of Mikdash, it's something permanent that doesn't move. It's actually, it also reverses, because the base of Mikdash, the temple was destroyed, but the tabernacle is still in existence. Right? It's just folded up and it's somewhere underneath the Har HaBayit. Yesterday I went to hear one of the Turskis. You know, the Hasidic family, I think they're, what are they, Jikov? No, they're from Ruzhin somehow.
No,
they're Chernobyl. Yeah, but they're Chernobyl with Ruzhin somehow, I think. In any case, so he talked about, I always find this intriguing, what does somebody else say about Hasidus? So I went to hear him, because the title was very intriguing. He said, the one point we can take from Chassidus. Take one point from Chassidus. It's a whole new way of understanding all of Torah. But said one point. Let's see, what's the salient point? So he talked about davening. He said that people don't know how to daven. Why do they not know how to daven? Because they don't know how to have a conversation. I expected him to say that they don't know how to have a conversation with one another. It's not just with God. If you can't have a conversation with another human being, how are you going to have a conversation with God? But no, he talked about this. At the end, somebody came up to him, and I was listening. I wanted to hear the questions. You know, people don't want to ask questions publicly, so they come up at the end and they say something. And the person said that he was, I guess, at Esha Torah. There's a rabbi there called Coopersmith. I don't know who it is. And he was discussing with him the fact that he doesn't know what God is. So how do you expect him to actually do all these things?
Who said this?
The guy was asking the question. Okay. He tried to say this, it didn't come out so well, but he tried to say, how can I daven to God if I don't know what God is? What do you want me to imagine? He said, I have to have something in my mind. So it's well known that by the Ba'al Shem Tov and by everybody after that, the Rebbe also, the image of God as an old man in heaven is fine. If that's the image you have, because that's what every Jewish child has in his mind, it's fine. Leave it alone. It's not true. It's incorrect. But you have to have something, because most people, they don't have a philosophical image of what God. They don't have a mental image. So if they don't have a mental image, they have to have some kind of image, something to relate to. Because otherwise, what are they talking to? The wall, the air in front of them? What are they talking to? So it's interesting. He didn't answer that. He didn't answer him at all. In fact, but it got me to thinking that, you know, is it really impossible to write a book that would explain what God is? We have a number of very, very good explanations, really good. You know, even the scientific picture of God is not so bad compared to not having a picture at all. So,
what is the scientific picture? A bunch of electrons or protons?
No, it's the grand unifying force. connects everything together. Even that's not so bad. It's a big angel, really. But if it's something. If you don't have even that picture, what are you davening to? What are you talking about? The problem with the scientific picture is that it's impersonal. And so an impersonal picture is in some ways worse than not having a picture at all. But it's at least having something. Okay, so you believe that somehow this can move the laws of the universe. Okay, you believe this. Fine, you have something to relate to. So this Atzmus Mahus is basically the old man in heaven for Jews. At least for people who learn Chassidus. What does it mean? Who knows what it means? Nobody knows what it means. What does it mean? Don't know what it means. Ask somebody to define it. No clue. I can't define it. But this is like the old man in heaven. Okay, in any case. B'ashrat ha'atzmut, so the atzmus, this old man in heaven, whatever it is, she'ayta kamu bebet hamikdash. Again, the old man in heaven is incorrect. It's completely false. But you have to have something to hold on to. So in Chassidus, it's sublimated a little. It becomes atzmus. This word atzmus, nobody knows what it means. It's fine. Okay, it's atzmus. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that you can define God. I'm saying they have to have something to relate to. By the Ba'al Shem Tov, the cornerstone of the Ba'al Shem Tov's theology, if you want, is that you have to grasp God and then completely let it go. You have to have a mental image of whatever you're learning at the moment. This is what God is. And then, when you're finished, you have to let it go. Because it's incorrect. It's very partial. So anytime you learn something anytime you learn something in Torah, so that's the mental image of what God is. So God is what I just learned. You finished, you have to get rid of it. And that's the cornerstone of his theology. That's why for him, Hashem was that's called the immanent aspect of Hashem. However, Hashem is revealed to you now, that's what Hashem is. That's how you need to address him. But when you address him, when you daven, when you get up to daven, after you're learning, for instance, you have to clear your mind of everything. It's not any of this. It's like, says the Rebbe, what the Mekubal that the Rashba was in correspondence with, someone from Toledo, I think, or from Narvona, I don't remember, and told him, I daven to what the baby davens to, the little child. What does the little child daven to? He has no grasp. That's what I daven to. Okay. בהשראת העצמות שהייתה כאמור בבית המקדש, הרי עיקר הגילוי היה בקודש הקודשים. When we talk about this atzmus thing, this substance of God being revealed, where was it revealed? It was revealed in this Holy of Holies, okay? where the ark was. ודבר זה התבטא גם בגלוי לעיני בשר, and they saw this physically. How can you see it physically? בכך שמקום הארון אינו מן המידה. בקודש הקודשים דבר שהוא רק מצד עצמותו יתברך. So they saw a revelation of the Atzmus through the fact that the ark took up space but did not take up space. The paradox of the ark. And this is the essence of God's revelation in the world. This is where everything comes from. This is, by the way, how the Tanya ends, the last 3 chapters, in a long meditation about what this means. Okay? So there he says that's Echal Kodesh HaKodeshim, that's Chochma Bin Andas, that's where it starts from. Everything it says at the end of the Tanya, which is considered by those who learn Tanya to be the most intellectual part of the Tanya. So what does this mean? That there's a paradox there. That God's substance is a paradox. And when you see a paradox in front of you, that's where you see God's substance. Okay? What was a paradox? On the one hand, you could measure the ark's dimensions. It was a physical object. On the other hand, if you measured it from side to side, you'd see that the walls of the tabernacle, right, which are 10 on 10 on 10, so you would look from each side, and the ark didn't take up space. You'd measure from the wall to the ark, and from the ark to the wall, and you'd get 10 cubits. So where's the ark in the middle? That's 1.5 cubits. It's gone. It's not there. So that you could see, you could actually sense it.
Only the Kohen go to one people.
What?
Nobody else.
No, why? Anybody could go in there and see it. They opened the... Of course you can. The guys will go in to fix it. They go in. when they erected the tabernacle every time, but the tabernacle was even easier. כפי שידוע, יש אלוקות כפי שהיא לבושה בטבע, דברים גשמיים, ויש אלוקות שמהווה את העולמות, ויש אלוקות מבחינה נעלית מן ההתהוות. So there is godliness in its aspect as it creates nature in physical objects.